Dean Maggs, I want to thank you for that nice introduction. I was listening to it and hoping it would just go on and on and on. Hey, it's a great honor for me as a graduate of this distinguished law school to be here with you, the class of 2011, and to be back on a campus that's far different than the one I knew, with a faculty that's far larger, with course offerings that go far beyond anything I could have imagined back in those days. Some of my classmates are here with the Stockton Society, and we were commenting on that earlier. This is a great day. It's a joyous day. It's a day that you've long awaited. It's a day that's come after an awful lot of hard work, an awful lot of discipline, some sacrifice, and, as the Reverend said, some bills. And now it's time for you to really enjoy the joyous moment that's about to befall you when you are graduates of one of the great law schools of America. You'll leave this law school quite a bit different than you entered. Your mind has been stretched, your analytical capabilities developed, your capacity to reason, your capacity to discern, your capacity to distinguish facts that are really important from those that aren't. You probably all went through, as I did, those excruciating moments in your first year when you're not quite ready to be called upon, and the professor calls on you, and you do the best you can. I remember doing that once in a torts class, and the professor, a very able man, looked at me after I recited my response, and he said, "Mr. Snow, you get an A for poetry, but this isn't a poetry class." The opportunity to engage first-rate minds, which you've had, the opportunity to go through the broad case law and to go through the programs, the rich programs that this law school offers you, the chance to engage with an adjunct faculty that knows Washington and the federal agencies and the courts like no other law school has access to. That's a huge asset for you as you move on. So I offer my heartiest congratulations to you. Again, it's a great day, and I'm honored to be here. Normally, I don't use notes, but I'm going to use a couple of notes today, and I'll tell you the story as to why. When I was the nominee to be the Secretary of the Treasury, this was November of 2002, and was about to be introduced to America as the next Secretary of the Treasury. I was sitting with the President, and we were having a very pleasant conversation in the Oval Office, and the President said to me, "John, we're really looking forward to having you on board. The staff at the White House eagerly awaits your arrival. You know, we need to communicate our policies more effectively. We need to be able to talk to Wall Street and Main Street. We need to be able to go to the Congress and lay out our agenda effectively. And the staff says you're a good communicator. You give a good speech. You know how to talk to people and engage them." And I says, "Well, thank you very much, Mr. President." He says, "No, I'm serious. This is really important. This is just what we need. And I want you in the halls of the Congress. I want you on Wall Street. I want you across the country, taking our message out." He said, "They tell me, John, that you often don't use notes." And I said, "Yes, Mr. President, that's actually the case. I was a professor at one time, and I learned when you have a large class and you use notes, you lose your audience." He says, "Boy, that's a wonderful skill. To be able to speak extemporaneously, that's just marvelous." He leaned over close to me and said with a stern face, "In this job, use notes." Now, there was a lot of value in that lesson. When you're the Treasury Secretary, you're called on to talk about all sorts of things, but nothing more sensitive than the dollar. The financial press is always putting to the Secretary, whoever he is, whatever administration, the question, "Mr. Secretary, what do you think of the dollar? Mr. Secretary, is your dollar policy working? Mr. Secretary, what do you think about the dollar versus the euro?" Well, those are questions you do your best to avoid. You find out that that's trouble. There are $2 trillion daily traded in currencies and another 3 or 4 trillion in swaps and derivatives around the 2 trillion. So it's big numbers, and just little changes produce huge opportunities for traders to make a lot of money, and they want to see the currency volatile. That's where they make their money. So you're always very cautious, and that's best illustrated by the story of the very cautious but very able Treasury Secretary who was invited to give some comments at a small gathering. And he gave his comments, and at the conclusion of his little speech, somebody raised their hand and said, "Would you take some questions?" And he said, "Well, yes, I will." And he turned, though, to the chairman of the meeting, and he said, "Mr. Chairman, do I have your assurance that there are no members of the media here?" And he received that assurance. And then he looked to the chairman. He said, "Mr. Chairman, can I have your assurance that everything that goes on here is confidential?" And he received that assurance. And then he turned to the chairman sternly and said, "Mr. Chairman, is what I say here completely off the record?" He then got the question he anticipated about the dollar, and he looked at the questioner sternly and he said, "No comment." In thinking about today and what might be appropriate subjects to address with you, a lot of things came to mind. I had Dean Maggs for counsel and advice. I had former Dean Larson for counsel and advice. I thought about a lot of things. I thought about the euro crisis. Thought you might be interested in that. Then I thought about the budget deficit and the difficulty we seem to be having in coming to grips with our long-term debt obligations. And then I thought of China and the rise of the BRICS and where America is going. And can America compete, which to me is not a function of a threat that China poses, but rather it's a question of our own ability in the public and private sectors to get our own houses in order. And I thought about all those things, and then I said, you know, when I was sitting where you're sitting, those many years ago, I had something closer to home in mind. Where's this going to take me? What will this lead to? What are the opportunities that come from the years I've put in hard work and disciplined work at this institution? Have I made the right choice? That's the question that runs through your minds. Will I find fulfilling opportunities in the law and related subjects? Well, that was the question that occupied the minds of my classmates when we sat where you are. And today I look at what they've accomplished, and they've gone on and done all sorts of things in various fields. Some who are with us today became leading political figures in their states, became judges, some business leaders, some professors. They've gone on to have meaningful and full lives. And you're more blessed than we were. The law school is stronger today than it was then. The faculty is deeper. The physical plant is not recognizable by the standards of my time. The adjunct faculty is wondrous. And you've had this opportunity to test your intellect against the brightest group of students that ever come to the GW Law School. At least that's what the dean tells me. And to test yourself against world-class faculty. You know, once you encounter really fine minds, as Oliver Holmes says, your own mind gets stretched. In that famous quote, that once the mind gets stretched, it never returns to its former dimensions. Well, your minds have been stretched. And you leave this law school with a deep intellectual capital. An intellectual capital that will allow you to do virtually anything you want to do. I know the law firm business has changed some from my day. The old sort of escalator notion that the idea of getting into the law firm, spending a number of years, becoming a partner, and then carrying on, that's probably not the model anymore. It's not linear. But of course, many of my classmates, including myself, had anything but a linear career. I've been a government lawyer. I've been a private practitioner. I've been a government regulator. I've been the general counsel of a big company. I've been a policymaker. I've practiced litigation before federal agencies. I've been involved in legislative practice, which is a fascinating practice, and some of you may already know a lot about it. The law offers countless pathways forward. It prepares you for virtually anything, almost anything. I was in office 3 days when it fell to the Secretary of the Treasury to defend the budget, the 2004 budget of the administration. It's always the next year's budget is 03. It was January of 03, and I'd been in office for 3 days. I'd taken the weekend. I got sworn in on a Friday, and it's now Tuesday. Ways and Means Committee, and we're presenting the budget of the United States. And I got a good introduction to the new Washington. The Washington was far different than the more tranquil and civilized Washington I'd known in my days in the Ford administration. And did my best to get ready, did my best to answer the first set of questions that came along, and then the second set, and then a member of Congress came on who was clearly steamed up, and he looked at me and he said, "Mr. Secretary, you are presiding over the worst economy since the days of Hoover. Mr. Secretary, you have taken a large surplus, government surplus, and turned it into a deficit. Mr. Secretary, there are millions of people unemployed. You haven't created one job. And the prospects for the future are not bright. And there's no growth. Where's the growth?" And he's working himself into a fever, to a frenzy. And he looks at me and says, "Mr. Secretary, you ought to be impeached." Well, I'm thinking to myself, I've been here 3 days, Congressman. Give me a little time if you want to see what I can do. You know, one of the lessons of a good law school is when your opponent is digging himself into a hole and making himself look ridiculous, let him do it. So I didn't have much of a response to the congressman, except to let him go on and rant and rave. Law school is probably the best liberal arts education in the world. My father used to tell me that. I didn't know what he meant. I do now. Through the study of the law, you learn American history. You learn constitutional principles. You learn how men over the ages and women have learned to solve problems, taking the path that avoids the worst outcomes. You learn the trade-offs that are inherent in making decisions. And most of all, you learn to really think hard. You learn to look at facts and weigh them. You learn to determine what's relevant. You learn how to synthesize. You learn how to analyze, synthesize, and you learn how to persuade. Those are pretty good skills. They're skills that, as a lawyer in business, you will find invaluable. They're skills that as an aide to a congressman you'll find invaluable. They're skills as an aide to a judge you'll find invaluable. They're skills that trying cases and representing clients you'll find invaluable. The pathways available to you, the pathways open to you because of your intellectual skills, because of your own talents, and you're blessed with talent and you're blessed with this education. The pathways open to you have absolutely no limits. My advice would be simply this. As you think about those opportunities, as you use those talents, as you use this marvelous education, follow the advice of Ralph Waldo Emerson, who said, be your own star. Look to yourself. Don't let somebody else script your life for you. You be the author of your own life, the author of your own destiny. I wish you well as you move on in the years ahead. And you'll know you've arrived when the Associate Dean for Development begins writing you regularly and calling you and saying, do you remember the university that made all this success possible? Best to all of you. Thank you.